I'm going to continue our lessons on the Torah, and I'm going to start to talk about the commands, and we're going to go through the 10 commandments. They are the 10 categories of commandments, so we'll start off with the first category, and actually the first and the second command are intertwined together. They amount to the same thing. We'll call them idolatry as a general term. Technically, idolatry refers to having a man-made object involved, which is the second commandment. But the second commandment always involves the first commandment, which is having no other gods before me. Okay, so if you're having another god before God, it can have a man-made object, and that's the second commandment, or it cannot have a man-made object, and that is the first commandment. And all of it is falls under the general term of idolatry in that sense of having no other gods before me. So in Exodus 20, verse 3, we have the first commandment that says, "You shall have no other gods before me." And this means that you're going to have something that takes precedence over God. And this comes out normally in terms of the commandments. Okay? If you look at Psalm 1, for example, which is the first step in the path is, are you going to seek God or are you going to seek something else? And that is the basic definition of having some other God before me. But in Psalm 1 it says, "Happy is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful." So it starts out by talking about general sin, every kind of sin, right? And then verse 2, he says, "But his delight is in the law of the Lord," the Torah. "And in his Torah he meditates day and night." So here he's saying that either you're following the Torah of God, or you're following something else. And if you're following something else, that's idolatry. And that's also sin. In other words, idolatry makes up the foundation of all sin. Okay? In 1 John, it talks about a lot of different issues, a lot of different sin issues and so forth. And the last verse, this is in 1 John 5:21, the very last verse, he summarizes the whole book and he says, "Little children, stay away from idols." Well, that's an odd thing to say unless you understand that idolatry is a summary or a foundation of all sins. Every sin that you can think of involves putting something ahead of God. God wants you to do this. His Torah says to do this, or His Spirit tells you to do this, and you want to do that, and you do that because you're putting that ahead of God. Okay, that's idolatry. So any value system that is ahead of God's Torah is idolatry. And this is something that we see in our society a lot. Everybody says, oh, you have to be loving, and they define love instead of defining. See, love is the definition, is defined by the Torah, right? But they are defining love according to some other value system. That is idolatry. That is arrogance. Okay, arrogance is another way of saying idolatry. Okay, Proverbs 8:13, 16, 18, and 1 Timothy 3:6, 1 John 2:15 through 17, Isaiah 13:11, James 4:13 through 16. These are all verses that deal with arrogance and pride. Okay, pride goes before a fall, right? That's in the Bible. So how do we tell what is the correct God? There is a Jesus who teaches against the Torah. This is a false God. Okay? There is a Yeshua who teaches to follow the Torah. This is the correct God. Okay? And there's a lot of people who would disagree with both of those statements because they don't understand this idea. Let's go to Deuteronomy 13:4. Now, Deuteronomy 13 coincidentally comes before Deuteronomy 12. Okay? And that's going to be significant here in a minute. But Deuteronomy 13, let's read the first little section. If there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he gives you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder comes to pass, of which he spoke to you, saying, let us go after other gods which you have not known, and let us serve them. You shall not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for the Lord your God is testing you to know whether you love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him and guard his commandments and obey his voice. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. But that prophet or dreamer of dreams shall you put to death, because he has spoken in order to turn you away from the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to entice you from the way in which the Lord your God commanded you to walk, so you shall burn the evil from your midst. So we see here that there's two gods, okay, that are competing for your action. You're going to follow one of those gods. And both of them are giving you signs and wonders, okay? We will see in the book of Revelation how the false prophet gives signs and wonders, calls fire out of the sky, right? So that's important, because the apostles are supposed to give signs and wonders. If a person is not giving a sign or a wonder, then you don't have to follow him, right? But if he is giving you a sign or a wonder, then you have to decide, is he also following the Torah? Okay? So you have to check it to see, does it line up with the commands of God? And he mentions here this idea of bringing you out of the land of Egypt. The Exodus is huge signs and wonders. Does anybody have anything beyond the stuff that happened at the Exodus? No, nobody has anything beyond that. So God is saying, not only are you to follow me, but the reason you follow me is because my signs or wonders are bigger than theirs. Okay? You'll also notice that the punishment for idolatry is death. And this cannot be commuted. You can't change this to a fine. Death is a really big deal, and he spends idolatry is a big deal. And he spends the rest of the chapter talking about, verse 6, if your brother or the son of your mother, your son or your daughter, the wife of your bosom, or your friend who is as your own soul secretly entices you, saying, let us go and serve other gods which you have not known, neither you or your fathers, of the gods of the people which are all around you, near you or far off, from one end of the earth to the other end, you shall not consent to him or listen to him, nor shall your eye pity him, nor shall you spare him or conceal him. So we're getting serious about this idolatry thing, because it's worse than murder. Murder is number 2 in precedence, right? Idolatry is number 1. Why? Because idolatry kills your soul. Murder only kills your body. If someone kills you, you're going to heaven. So it's no big deal in comparison to idolatry, which kills your soul, and now you're in hell forever. That's a problem, obviously. Now, I said that this comes before chapter 12. Jump back to chapter 12, and let's look at verse 1. These are the statutes and judgments which you shall be careful to observe in the land, which the Lord your God of your fathers, is giving you to possess all the days that you shall live on the earth or in the land. So in other words, from chapter 12 on to the rest of Deuteronomy, all of that applies to what you do in the land. So idolatry has capital punishment in the land, but outside of the land it does not. Okay, if you're living in America, for example, and your son tells you to worship another god, you don't kill him. Okay, if you're in the land, you do. But if you're outside of the land, you don't. And what this does is it's a very gracious, okay? And the reason for that is because what this implies is that if you want to serve some other god, you have the right to do so. You have the right of consent. You have the right of choice, okay? And as such, you can move out of the land. If you don't want to serve God, you go somewhere else and do it. And it's perfectly acceptable in some Gentile nation, right? But not in the land of Israel. In the land of Israel, you either move out or you get executed. That's your choice, okay? And why is that? Because we want the land of Israel to be a place that influences us towards righteousness. Righteousness defined by the Torah, okay? So anything that is influencing us away from that has to be removed from the borders of Israel. And there's nothing that says you can't move out of Israel. If you want to worship another god, you can move out of Israel and do that. So there's no problem with that, other than the fact that it's going to have consequences that you're going to have to put up with. Because it's not a righteous system. A righteous system is one where people are nice to each other. An unrighteous system is one where they are mean to each other. And if that's what you want, that's what you will get if you move out of the land and do idolatry. I'm going to stop right there. There's a little bit more in here that I would like to cover on idolatry. But this will get you started.